Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. In today's video, I'll be running through my transfer plans ahead of Game Week 17. Right then, so let's take a look at my team score so far in Game Week 16. 61 points without the bonus from Sunday's games loaded. I'm recording this just after the Chelsea and the Spurs games have finished, so that Pedro Porro clean sheet is particularly sweet. Considering he didn't start as well, I consider myself very, very fortunate on that one. And Jackson has got a pretty late goal in that game as well. I don't know who's going to get the bonus in that game, but either way, it's going to be a pretty good green arrow for me. It's a pretty decent week all round. Points all around my defence for once, which feels incredible. Palmer blanking as my captain was annoying, but I think I'm just about going to sneak inside the top million for the first time pretty much all season, and it's also the first time I've really started to put a run of green arrows together. So it's been a good week. I've got Semenyo to play on Monday night, so fingers crossed it gets slightly better tomorrow. But let's have a look at what that means for my team plan going in to Game Week 17. Right then, so here's my team as it's set up, all 15. I haven't picked my starting lineup just yet. I wanted to show you the full 15 players and see what I can do with all of that first. So 3 free transfers, which is the second time this season I've been able to do that. I rolled the transfer last week. I was very, very tempted to bring in someone like a Daniel Munoz for Rico Lewis, who was going to be sat on my bench anyway. And I have to admit, until very late on in the Brighton Palace game, I was regretting not making that move. But Munoz has now got his 5th yellow card. He's going to be banned for the Arsenal game. So I'll probably be looking at bringing him in a few game weeks' time rather than imminently. Now, one player in particular really did put his hand up in the Game Week 16 fixtures, and that was Anthony Robinson. Has really reminded us all what he's capable of with 2 assists against Liverpool. Now, Fulham's run of fixtures now is absolutely ridiculous, especially when it comes to those home fixtures. And I'll bring up Robinson and his form and fixtures now because he's very much in my transfer plans. If you look at the fixtures ahead, 3 of the next 4 are at home against sides that you might not necessarily back them to keep clean sheets in all of them, but there are good chances of clean sheets in any one of those games, especially Southampton and Ipswich, both at home in the next 4 game weeks. Bournemouth and Chelsea as well in there. Not a bad run whatsoever. And then the run, as you can see, pretty much extends all the way through to around about game week 28-29, with only 1 or 2 games where you might not be that happy playing him. The other thing that's really going for Robinson, and I'm sure everyone's going to be talking about him this week, so I won't blabber on about him for too long, but he's got decent underlying attacking data, 0.13 assist threat per 90. Obviously, a little bit low on the goal threat, but 0.15 XGI per 90 is no mean feat for a defender anyway. And at his price, having someone who is a 90-minute man, as you can see, 90 minutes in every single game so far this season, incredibly reliable, incredibly consistent. And when you've got those fixtures in the midweek as well, you want to be able to rely on your defence to give you those minutes. And Robinson ticks all of those boxes for me. And Fulham's defensive data is actually surprisingly really good this season. Last 2 games have been tough, but it has been against Arsenal and Liverpool. But over the season so far, 1.26 XGC per 90 as a team, that is very, very convincing. And obviously, we all know Fulham have been performing well this season too. So Anthony Robinson is going to be top of the targets to bring in this week in defence. As you can see, my defence consisting of people like Porro at home to Liverpool. You've got Lewis, who's also been incredibly frustrating recently. Definite players that I could be looking to move on for Robinson. And like I said, I've got 3 free transfers. I've got 0.3 in the bank, so I can bring him in even for the likes of Lewis if I wanted to. So that's transfer 1, will almost certainly be a defensive move, probably looking at bringing in Robinson. Now, the other player that I am considering in defence if I was to upgrade Porro would be Alexander-Arnold. Now, the form isn't quite so good necessarily. Obviously, didn't play the best game against Fulham himself, but the fixtures to come are really good after Spurs away. Now, this run all the way through, I mean, arguably, you can hold on to him all the way through to game week 33. You'd imagine you wildcard before that, but it's always great to have a player that you know you aren't going to want to imminently transfer out. The only problem with him is, of course, the price point is a little harder to get to at 7 million, but the data is incredible. 0.34 XGI per 90, very, very convincing. The defensive data is good, and of course, you'd expect him to get very good minutes over this period too. So if you can get to Trent easily enough, then I think it makes a lot of sense to do so. And one combination I could look at doing, just working it out in live time here, I could look at bringing in Trent for Porro. I would need 1.2 extra, but I could make that money up by selling someone like a Solanke, and then I'd have 6.3 to play with. So at that point, there's quite a few forwards that I could be looking at. It would mean that I'm rocking 2 cheap forwards and 1 expensive forward, or expensive-ish, which could be a bit inflexible if any of the cheaper forwards go out of form at any time. Obviously, João Pedro's not been great. I would be looking at maybe someone like a Wissa, but the fixtures aren't great, you have to admit. Not amazing there. Although I wouldn't let that put me off necessarily. You could look at maybe someone like an Evan Nilsson, but I've already got Semenyo, and whilst I do quite like Evan Nilsson, and I could look at going there, the fixtures don't last that much longer. You've only got another 4. Obviously, West Ham is still to come in game week 16. It's not the best run after that, so not that convinced. And Raul Jimenez is getting taken off early quite a lot at the moment. And of course, Muniz, who came off the bench, got the goal against Liverpool as well. So whilst the fixtures are great, I'm a little bit worried about Raul Jimenez too. So my routes to get to Trent over Porro, for instance, are not necessarily easy, and it would leave me with a lot of cheaper options in my forward 8. So I'd have Semenyo, Rodgers, João Pedro, and another that is under 6.3 million. And that to me feels a little bit tight around the edges, and I feel a little bit too inflexible. So what I'm most likely to do, as I'm sure you've worked out, is probably be looking at bringing in Robinson rather for someone like Pedro Porro. Now that gives me quite a lot of money to play with if I was to remove Dominic Solanke. Now, just to bring up his player information at the moment, obviously got the assist at time of recording. It could be taken away. I think it will stay, but we don't know. Got the assist today against Southampton in a 5-0 win. To only get 1 assist as a centre forward is not great for the performance that you'd expect from him, but we take those. And over the season so far, 9 attacking returns isn't terrible, but it's more the fact that Spurs are bagging so many goals at the moment. Obviously 3 last week against Chelsea, 5 today against Southampton, and he's just not that heavily involved in any of the end product at the moment, and he seems almost like a decoy runner at times. The data is good, so I don't think he's a must sell, but if I was to get rid of him, and Liverpool at home being next, I think now is a good opportunity to maybe look at doing so if you think that there's a player with high enough upside elsewhere. Now, the player that naturally, for me, is right at the top of my list, as I'm sure will be for a lot of you, is Alexander Isak. Now, obviously, I don't have the money to do this in 2 moves. I do have that third free transfer though. So Alexander Isak in great form, obviously 5 attacking returns in the last 3 game weeks, including in games against Liverpool and Brentford. Absolutely sensational form on penalties. The data is really, really good now. 0.57 XG per 90. Combined with his XA, it's 0.73 per 90, which is very, very good. Ipswich next. And whilst the fixtures on the ticker might not look the best, Villa, Man United, Spurs, at least in 2 of those games, Villa and Spurs, you could easily see him scoring quite a few. Man United, again, we don't know quite how they'll shape out any single given game week, but I wouldn't be too concerned about Alexander Isak's prospects in any of those games. And then after that, you've got a nice little run through to game week 25 as well. So he ticks all of the boxes for me right now. I'd love to bring him in. I'm 0.1 short, which is very frustrating, but I do have that third free transfer. And I am really tempted as it stands at time of recording, and it would be very tight, but I could look at shipping off someone like Morgan Rodgers, who has at times been very useful for me, and at 5.4 million is a very good budget pickup still. He's still getting great minutes. The data's not incredible, but at that price point, it's not bad. But the next fixture, obviously Man City wouldn't be too scared, but next couple aren't amazing. although admittedly 19 through to around 25 is pretty good. But I still think that maybe there's an opportunity there to maybe just find myself that extra 0.1 million. And when there's a player like Amad Diallo putting his hand up at the moment, I'll bring up his performance today now. His performance was absolutely sensational. And in this new system with Amorim, he's now playing in one of the dual 10 roles behind the striker. And I think his prospects moving forward look really, really positive. Good fixtures to come, playable, I would say, in every single one of those games, maybe bar Liverpool in game week 20, but he would very much be my 8th attacker. If I just map that out now and put that in, I have the exact money to do it. I almost certainly have to move tonight. So by the time you're watching this on a Monday morning or through the week, I'll have either been priced out overnight or I'll have had to have made those transfers just after recording now. So it's whether or not I convince myself into actually making those moves tonight. But I am really, really tempted. The data from today was good. Obviously, the goal was fantastic, but also the penalty he won was very, very encouraging too. The data over the season isn't great, but look at the patchy minutes he got when he was with Ten Hag. 17, 31, missed a couple, 5 minutes, 75. It doesn't really do him many favours in terms of getting those chances. And what are you going to do in 5 minutes against Spurs, for instance? That's very, very difficult to pick up the data. In the last few game weeks, he's been getting assists regularly. He's definitely played himself into their strongest 11. And if he's getting 90 minutes week in, week out, which so far under the new era, he's getting most weeks. He got rested against Arsenal. I'm not too bothered about that. But it's getting better and better week on week. This is a great run of fixtures for an attacker anyway. And at 5.1 million, I always say this, you're not looking for an attacking return every single week. You're looking for one maybe every other week if you're lucky. And again, because I'm playing with this front 8, I'd have a slightly stronger front 8 as well because I wouldn't be downgrading Solanke, I'll be upgrading him. So much more playable front 8 at any given moment. I could bench Amad Diallo in any match because the other 7 are strong, but I'm also very, very happy to start him as well, given the way he's performing right now. So I currently think that this is the route I want to take, in all honesty. I think that Robinson in for Porro seems very logical, although Porro has done very well for me. I'll bring his data back up. I'll just restore him now. He has done well for me generally. 14 points against City was probably the highlight of my season so far. Gotten quite a few attacking returns in recent game weeks. But if Spurs generally aren't keeping many clean sheets, at 5.5 million, whilst the fixtures are good, in the next 5, how many clean sheets do you really expect Spurs to keep? I would say at a push, maybe 1, possibly 2, really, really pushing it there though. You're not expecting a clean sheet against Liverpool, not against Newcastle, not against Arsenal really. They might surprise us, of course. They were able to against City. But you play the odds, and against Nottingham Forest and Wolves are probably the most likely times to keep a clean sheet. Away from home against Nottingham Forest, I'm not loving. And then Wolves is probably the one where you'd maybe back him to get something from a clean sheet point of view. So I don't hate him moving forwards, but he's just a little bit too expensive for me to be holding on to if it means that it prevents me from getting someone who has way more upside, like an Alexander Isak, over someone like Solanke who, okay, he's been fine. He hasn't been terrible, but he's trundling along with an assist here, a goal every now and then, rarely gets bonus points with it as well because, like I said, in a 3 or 4-0 win or 4-goal thriller, whatever, he's only getting 1 attacking return, so other players are getting the bonus ahead of him, and it limits his upside as a pick. Now, I think upgrading to Isak is a really tangible upgrade, and it will move the needle in my team. It gives me another penalty taker, another talismanic figure, and honestly, I think if that means that I need to get rid of Porro and Rodgers, whilst I don't hate either of those players, and I genuinely think that Robinson and Amad Diallo do outscore Rodgers and Pedro Porro, respectively, over the next 5 or 6 game weeks, I think those moves make a lot of sense. Now, the other thing that I just quickly want to note now, I'll again check it in live time, but I'm pretty sure that Rodgers, is, yes, on 4 yellow cards. So that's another factor I need to weigh in as well. I do also have Jackson on 4 yellows. So carrying 2 into the next few game weeks might be a bit risky. So maybe that's another excuse to look at getting rid of Rodgers, bring in Amad Diallo, who, to my knowledge, isn't on 4 yellows. He's on 2, thankfully. And that's just one less thing for me to worry about too. So that's the way I'm looking at the moment. I think a lot of people will be looking at bringing in Robinson. A lot of people will be looking at bringing in Amad and probably Isak as well. But I think I've got a nice little combination of the ability to bring in all 3 for 3 players that are frustrating me at the moment, who have limited upside. And the 3 I'm bringing in right now, I honestly really back over the next few fixtures. So whilst there are midweek fixtures in the Cup, obviously Europa League as well, I'm not too worried because I've got a little bit more depth than maybe some. And because a lot of the players I'm not expecting to play in midweek, obviously Cole Palmer, for instance, won't be playing in Europe, those kind of things, I think that maybe I can get away with it. A little bit more research perhaps is needed because Newcastle play in midweek, and that could be a risk on Isak, for instance. But I don't know. I'm pretty tempted to move early on this one. I've got the exact money. I would have to move tonight, I think, to be able to make it work because players are moving up and down very quickly right now. I'd bank on Amad to go up in the next day or maybe 2. Same with Robinson. Same with Isak. So I think these are a triple swap that make a lot of sense. Let me know in the comments below what you think of those transfer options. And of course, I've focused on just a couple of players or a few players in this video because it's all part of my transfer plans. But do let me know in the comments below what your transfer plans are, and if you've got any questions on players that I haven't spoken about today that you're interested in, again, let me know in the comments below and I'll answer all of you before we hit the deadline. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. If you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that'd be greatly appreciated. I'm really trying my very best to hit 2,500 subscribers before we hit 2025. If you can press that button and help me get on my way towards that, that would be absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you later on this week as we lock in my team ahead of the deadline. And for now, good luck in the rest of Game Week 16 tomorrow night.